Namaste. Good morning to
Namaste.
everyone present here.
Morning.
On behalf of Hindi University West Bengal, I warmly welcome all our respected guests, speakers, faculty members, and students to today's webinar on comparative world literatures. This program has been organized with the aim of encouraging dialogues across languages, cultures, and literary traditions, and to deepen our understanding of literature beyond national and linguistic boundaries. The webinar is being held under the gracious patronage of our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Ma'am Professor Nandini Sahu,
Thank you.
whose vision and academic leadership continue to inspire meaningful intellectual engagement at Hindi University. We are honored to have with us two distinguished scholars as speakers today, Dr. Pinaki Roy sir and Dr. Bala Subramanian sir, whose academic contributions have significantly enriched the field of literary studies. We look forward to their insightful deliberations during this session. Now, I must say, it is my great pleasure to introduce the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Hindi University, West Bengal, Professor Nandini Sahu, ma'am. Professor Sahu is a renowned academician, poet, and creative writer with almost 23 books to her credit and recognition as a best-selling author on Amazon. She has received several prestigious honors, including double gold medals, the Literary Award, and gold medals from the Vice President of India, the Michael Madhusudan Academy Award, and the Lifetime Achievement Award in the year 2024. Her latest publication, Medusa, along with recent recognitions such as the Tagore Samman in the year 2025 and an honorary fellowship from the International Academy of Ethics, reflects the depth and range of her literary and academic contribution. Her scholarships in new literatures, critical theory, and I must say folklore has firmly established as a leading voice in Indian English literature and of course in higher education too. Now, may I now please respectfully invite Professor Nandini Sahu ma'am to kindly share our initial words and formally open today's webinar. Ma'am, please.
Thank you, Paramita, for that generous introduction. Namaskar, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, I welcome Bala sir and Dr. Pinaki to be a part of our important lecture series, Hindi University Special Lecture Series on Comparative World Literatures. I have very long association with both of them. We have collaborated in some important project by the government of India, where I got to know about their research as well as their work, their contributions to literature departments, languages. Also, both of them have been very good, very compassionate, very kind human beings. So the association with Hindi University, these two professors, is going to be, very, very long, and we are going to have a long way of collaborations. I'm sure it
Thank you,
starts
ma'am.
with today.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bala sir has various, interdisciplinary research areas. I talk to him sometimes on Indian knowledge systems, on Hindu studies, on English studies, American literature, linguistics, so many varieties of things he has been working on. And whenever we meet, we end up discussing on various topics, various subjects, and there is a personal touch with everything that he does. I have met his research scholars who are already professors in universities in India, and they have such a high opinion of Bala sir that he prepares them for life, not just for classroom teaching. Rather, he takes care of preparing his scholars for life. His scholars are all over the country teaching and taking the legacy forward that he has created. I'm rather fortunate to be a part of the team of scholars or teachers that follow him, that respect him, and I'm going to learn from him throughout my life. Bala sir,
Sure.
we welcome you.
Sure.
Yes, we welcome you to
Thank
be
you.
a part of our lecture series. And Dr.
Thank you.
Pinaki is an independent researcher. He has been teaching, I think, for a decade or more than that. Paramita
Yes,
will
ma'am.
introduce that. He
Since
is very, very young.
2003. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So, or 2 decades, but he's so young. So I didn't know how many years he has been teaching. And then today he will be speaking on the German writings and then
Yes, ma'am.
post-colonial studies, two very, very important subjects. Because in the comparative world literature MA program that we have proposed from Hindi University, which eventually we will design. Probably this year we will launch the program, or we will at least design the syllabus. We will need your help as a scholar from post-colonial studies and German literature and various world languages and literatures. The meaningful contribution that you have been making in West Bengal and other parts of the
Thank
country.
you.
I must put a deep sense of appreciation for you. I have gone through your profile, your work,
Thank you, ma'am.
and I must say that the country needs good scholars like you, dedicated scholars like you. Please keep doing your good work,
Thank you,
and
ma'am.
thanks for being a part of this Hindi University special lecture series. And about this special lecture series, I would just briefly inform both the experts today. We started this series in the month of January when I joined as the Vice Chancellor. I had some brainstorming session with Dr. Paromita and my other colleagues, and then they came up with a lot of enthusiasm to do something about it. And then I asked Paromita if you would like to be the coordinator. And then since then, there is no looking back. Almost 70 scholars, including the two of you, have been a part of this series. Sometimes we take three scholars together, sometimes we take two, even we have taken one sometimes. And they have enriched us with their deep research, their original research on translation studies, on comparative world literatures. They have explained it to our students what is comparative literature and what is comparative world literature. You know, and then how to put it as a part of our pedagogy. Because eventually, the MA program that we would be launching on comparative world literatures is going to take all your lectures, your research into consideration. Even we are planning to have a Swayam or a Swayam Prabha channel. I am in discussion with the channels. If we have, 100 lectures or something, we can put everything in the channel. But that is yet to happen, so I'm not officially announcing that now. But we are going to put the two lectures today, both of you. Whatever you're going to speak today will be a part of history for Hindi University,
Hmm.
because it's going to be a part of our YouTube channel. And our
Okay.
YouTube channel is very, very popular. Universities all over the country and otherwise, they're watching our channels and they are following us. They are listening to the lectures by the best brains of the country. So I'm glad that you all are
Okay.
both of you are going to be a part of it with your research. Without further wasting anybody's time, let me rather listen to both of you. After that, I may be in a position to ask a few questions or put a little bit of comments or something if Paramita permits me. So I welcome, and now Paramita, please formally introduce and invite them. Namaskar.
Thank you, ma'am. We now move to the first lecture of today's webinar. It is my pleasure to introduce our next webinar. First speaker, Dr. Bala Subramanian sir, a distinguished scholar whose academic work engages deeply with classical texts and their continuing relevance in the modern world. Dr. Bala Subramanian is a retired professor of English from Manmonian Sundaranar University, Tirunelveli, Tamil Nadu. He had his schooling and collegiate education in Dindigul, Tirunelveli. After his MA from St. John's College, he started his career in GTN Arts College, Dindigul, where he served in the Department of English for around 18 years before going over the Manonmanian Sundaranar University, Tirunelveli, and retired from service in the year 2012. All through his career, Dr. Balasubramaniam sir was engaged equally in teaching and research. He believed in the classroom teaching more and had the privilege of guiding 36 scholars successfully for the award of their PhD. In fact, research guidance enriched his learning. His areas of interest include literature and language studies in general and English phonetics in particular. Apart from teaching and research, he was on the administrative side as well. Member, syndicate, coordinator, NSS, and Dean, College Development Council of Manunmanian Sundaranar University. As a teacher, he has advocated for classroom teachings as the core area of the profession and of course is interested in the development of the younger generation for the welfare of the individual and the nation. Now, I would like to request Dr. Subramanian sir for his insightful lecture. Sir, please.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Pramita, for the introduction. And I uh, honestly aghast when Professor Nandini introduced me wonderfully well, And I am, in fact, privileged and proud of being a father. After all, elderly people like me depend upon the blessings of the children. That is what I used to tell in my classrooms also. And that way, I'm very happy and blessed that my chancellor is blessing me. Thank you very much, Nandini, Betty. Yeah. Now, it's wonderful to associate myself with your world literature series in, comparative world literature series. It's wonderful, in the university has started since Professor Nandini took over charge as the Vice Chancellor. And I've been going through the list, and I'm so very happy that the names of the people are those who have contributed to the literature and the language studies in India. That way, she is doing a wonderful job and putting it on YouTube and other channels for posterity is another excellent point of view that I must appreciate. I, it's my proud privilege to be with you this morning. And uh, comparative literature is far from me. Somehow or other, I was not going to comparative literature. But literature per se is La Grande. And that way, I just gone into literature studies as much as possible. Of course, I do comparative studies as also when were possible. That I wrote a couple of papers also on John Updike and a Tamil novelist, Bala by name. It was just a parallel study, not to the level of the great comparison which is expected from greater scholars like Professor Pinaki and Professor Nandini. And I restrict myself to uh, English literature in the sense that I love reading, rereading. In fact, it's a kind of revising of the previous literature. So whatever was done in the past has bearings on the present as well. That is why I thought I would look into the greatest literary writers of, I mean, centuries apart from each other. One, William Shakespeare, and the other, and T.S. Eliot. They're legends. Their contribution to literature is permanent. Is permanent. Even now, people have not stopped reading Shakespeare and T.S. Eliot in India. Of course, in a couple of universities in the West, I hear, and of course, I heard from one of the British professors that they have stopped reading Shakespeare. For me, Shakespeare is the be all and end all of literature, because Shakespeare is life for people. And that is why, I just wanted to just go through Shakespeare and T.S. Eliot. Both speak about life. Life is a wonderful thing always. People have a lot of opinions about life. Some people feel that why they have been living in the world. And some people happily say that they are very happy to live in the world. I belong to the second category. It's wonderful. I'm so very happy with the birth that I am now living in. And whatever the birth I get later, it should be same Bala Subramanian, same Pinaki, same Nandini, same Pramita, and same students and scholars whom I had the privilege of teaching in India and in other countries as well. That is why, I thought I should revisit Shakespeare and T.S. Of all the plays of Shakespeare, the many plays are wonderful plays, no doubt about that. And among the major four plays, I'm so very much fond of two plays. One is King Lear and the other is Othello. Because, both these plays have, impacts in our normal life that we love to read these plays again and again. I believe I have taught both the plays some 20 to 25 times or so, and read the same time. And every time I see the play is new. The play is new. And both the plays just give us, for example, the wonderful father that Lear is, and wonderful daughters like Cordelia. And all these children are excellent children, and that is why we are able to love. I do love the children very much. And that way, I just wanted to talk about Othello today, because Othello is a wonderful person, a lovely person. No, nobody can hate Othello just because he has murdered his wife. Because I feel that there are Othellos in everybody. And take, for example, Desdemona. I see all women of the world, Desdemonas. Desdemonas only, beautiful, beautiful, brilliant, excellent. And with all that, 99.9% Desdemonas in the world are innocent. And the 1% is otherwise, because the other disturbance from others makes them otherwise. That is what is Othello. And that is what the mover, and I don't call him mover, because I love him. How could I call him a mover and throw him away? I don't want to throw him away, because he is with us. So when you go through the play, when you read the play, you fall in love with the whole play primarily. At the same time, you just individually take every character, Othello alone, Desdemona alone, Iago, Emilia, and others, everybody. And Othello by himself is a character who is beyond comprehension, in the sense that he is so normal like us, but at the same time he is so abnormal also like us. That is why he was disturbed, and that is the ignorance of Othello by the side of the innocent Desdemona. See, so young, so fragile, and the fragility of the fragility and the frailty of Desdemona is her weakness of loving her husband more. This is what we expect of a woman, and that is what Othello also expected of Desdemona. Desdemona really succumbs herself to him. That is what is a tragedy. And along with the ignorance and innocence, there comes manipulation as well. Because we are all right, we are okay, but around us something is off the track, and Iago is off the track. Iago, we have to sympathize with that fellow also. We have to sympathize with that fellow. See, for example, because you are in a position, you could contribute your might, your valor, everything to the society where you belong, to the place where you belong. But when you think more and when you want more, you go otherwise. That is the tragedy of Iago. And in fact, I don't consider Othello a tragedy. Nor do I consider Desdemona a tragedy, but Iago is the tragedy. Iago is the tragedy. That has made both Othello and Desdemona, the personalities, suffer. They suffered. As we saw, Desdemona, so loving a creature, she loved. And Othello, so loving a person, he loved as well. But at the same time, their love did not mingle properly. That is why something or somebody comes in. That is the simple story. And it's again, life is wonderful, as I said earlier. But at the same time, life has disturbances as well. In the case of Othello, Desdemona, Iago, the kerchief is the culprit. The kerchief is the culprit. In the modern society, we also have culprits around us. We have culprits, not in the form of personalities like Bala Subramanian or Raman or Kamban or Kannan. But, it is otherwise in the sense that, for example, we are very happy with our technological advancements. We are uppish. We are going up and up, and we are reaching somewhere. It's wonderful. Say, for example, AI or ChatGPT or anything like that. All these things are kerchiefs around us. Kerchiefs. Othello's kerchief is in the form of AI, and I am always questionable. I may appear to be controversial in my statements, but I am controversial as well as very clear because it disturbs. Yesterday, when I was traveling from Cochin in a train, my neighbor was an IT professional. We were talking. Now, I have the habit of talking to people happily. Why not? And when I was talking to him, he's an IT professional. And finally, when we reached Coimbatore about 4 o'clock around yesterday evening, he said, "Sir, it's true. Advancements have destroyed us." That's the reality. That's the kerchief. And that is where we should be using these kerchiefs and these technologies sparingly, usefully. For example, this program per se. Pinaki ji is somewhere. Nandini is somewhere. I am somewhere down south. Yet we are able to link ourselves together. That is the greatest contribution of the technological advancement that we are in. But that kerchief was a dagger in the life of both Desdemona and Othello. When you read the play, you just go through every character, and but in the bedchamber scene where Othello kills Othello kills Desdemona, his life, his love. Oh my God! when he utters the words, put out the light and put out the light, when putting out the literal light and putting out the light of Desdemona, that's a very tragic situation. We sympathize with both Desdemona and Othello, and that is the simple story. And the story revolves around. From the beginning till the end, only jealousy is the hallmark in the play. And that is disturbed. Jealousy is a very common, I mean, appetite with the people. Common appetite. And we become jealous for anything and everything, finally putting the people to disturbance. And that is where we ought to be very careful. And if you just go on talking about literature or ancient literature or the present day literature and Nandini's books, and okay, God, Sita killed me. Sita has done so much, but Nandini Sita, rather, it took about more than a year to go through the whole book. But her Hindu studies and Sita, it took 1 year for me. Now, I'm a slow reader generally, but at the same time, I was happy to go through all these eventualities of human life, And Sita that way was great and is suffering as well. That is our part, And that way, literature of every country contributes to the growth of the human mind. After all, when man improves, the mind improves too. And when the mind improves, man becomes perfect, in my opinion. Man becomes perfect. Man is very happy. After all, what do we work for? We work for, our livelihood, our bread, butter, everything, And at the same time, we are happily protecting ourselves, and we are supposed to protect our neighborhood as well. It's no good disturbing the other. I'm individually happy, but when I am just individually happy, I must rest there. I should not look at others and think of the happiness of others or otherwise. That is what is the problem with Iago. He is not happy with both Othello and Desdemona. That is why he exploited the innocence of Desdemona and the ignorance of Othello. Exploitation is everywhere. That's what is going on. That's what is going on. By exploitation in the sense, I just would go to the past and the present as well. Invading countries. I'm not referring to the particular position at present in other countries, but invading the countries is invading the minds of the people. How can one invade another country without any reason? Any reason? They do, and they are proud that they are doing it. That is what took place in the case of Iago. He invaded the minds of both Othello and Desdemona. And that is where we as individuals become loveliest beings at one level, and at other level, we are also equally disturbed by issues, and that we ought to be careful there. And when we are happy, we are able to make others happy as well. When we are unhappy, we make others unhappy as well. That is the reality. And that is what took place. When Shakespeare wrote for 4.5 centuries before, he was able to look into the minds of the people, And in my opinion, I would say that after Shakespeare, Milton, Keats, Patrick White are some of the people who have looked into the minds of the people. That is why Patrick White tells human relationships are vast as deserts. Patrick White is a wonderful Australian novelist. He says, human relationships are vast. Look at the word he's using. Human relationships are vast as deserts. Deserts. That is what is the reality, because Patrick White means to say that deserts symbolize the mind of the people, the mind of the people. That is where, writers, poets, for me, greatest English poet after Shakespeare is John Keats. You know, he has suffered a lot, suffered a lot. He has known life, and at the same time, he was able to see through human lives so beautifully that he used two beautiful words, excellent diction, uh, beauty and truth. These are the two words, His Grecian urn would say, beauty is truth, truth, beauty. That is all you know on earth. That is all you need to know. He sums up human life. He sums up, all gamut of literature from Chaucer down, Nandini. Keats sums up literature, because in literature there is beauty and there is truth. That is why he sums up like this, beauty is truth. Wonderful expressions. See the combination of the words, beauty is truth, truth, beauty. The second line, that is all you know on earth and all you need to know. You need not know anything at all, That is enough. That is what is literature. That is what is the contribution of the classics to human. People say that classics means old books. No, it's not that. I feel that classics mean to say the classicness of the mind of the people. That is why Nandini's Sita is a classic. I'm yet to read her recent book, but these things contribute to our might and our knowledge. Corpus. And we are very, very happy to just build our corpus. Because we are in the process of going to to achieve our magnum opus. As a learner, as a speaker, as a critic, my magnum opus is talking to people, and Nandini's magnum opus is writing. Notwithstanding her schedule as the Vice Chancellor, she spends time reading as well as writing. It is a greatness. I'm an old man, I'm not able to read more, now am I able to write more, but I speak more. I speak more, and I feel that I must write something, and I just restrict myself to writing my views or explanations on social media like Facebook or Twitter or anything like that. And likewise, recently one Tamil Cosmopolitan has found out one methodology, Aratai, that is Zoho Corporate's boss, Sridhar Vembu. It's wonderful. Vembu is a person in technology, but he has read the lives of people that he has now come to know what life is and what literature is. That is why he is a corporate, but at the same time, he is in a small village near Tengasi. And in the village, he is developing the vistas of all technological advancements to people. That way, everybody is contributing something or other for every one of us. And that is where the magnum opus of T.S. Eliot comes. Now, after Shakespeare, you just read all the writers, all the poets, all the dramatists. The dramatist Shakespeare is La Grande, and when you come to Eliot, is grander. Is grander. In between, we see Keats. Look at I like the combination. Shakespeare, Keats, and Eliot. All these three have contributed so much. That is why Middleton Murray has summed up one of his essays on Keats with these words: Keats is with Shakespeare. Look at the words. 4 words he has summed up Keats and Shakespeare. Keats is with Shakespeare. That is the ideology. That is where comes our Eliot. Eliot, a poor man at one level. Well, for all of us, our personal disturbances are more that finally we just contribute our personal life as well in our creative writings as well. The creative writings as well. It's a kind of that's what I wrote in my thesis. Creative writing is release. In fact, it is a kind of retreat. In Christian ideology, the Catholic nuns and the priests would go for retreat. And that retreat I find in the creative writers, whether it is Shakespeare or Keats or Eliot or Nandini, they retreat into their creative world that they forget for a temporary period and they come down. They come down to us. And that is what is the contribution. That is what T.S. Eliot, Robert Burns, again, in one of his interviews says, a wonderful British poet, and he says, when I wrote my poem, 2 people knew what I wrote. One was God and the other was me. At present, now, only one person knows what I wrote. God alone knows. After writing, he stopped it. He stops it. He stops there, and he allows us to interpret, reinterpret, and then give a final version, ideology of their works of art. That is how. That is where critics abound in the society, and I am proud to be a critic. And they might be there that I would criticize our Nandini's books as well. Wonderful. That is where Eliot comes. Eliot. Thomas Stearns Eliot. As I said, poor guy, poor man. But, literally, he's great. He's rich. But, his personal problems were, were so much that he wanted to get release, and he retreated into writing, and he gave us the magnum opus, the Wasteland. You read whatever he has written, whatever Shakespeare has written. Shakespeare is a poet more than a dramatist. T.S. Eliot is more a dramatist than a poet. Either way around, they are all the contributors. And that way, Eliot's what do I say? The Wasteland, though written in the beginning of the 20th century, belongs to the previous centuries and the present century and the future century also. Any centuries, they cannot stop reading Eliot. I had the privilege of when I was in when I was a student of my master's program, my professor, Professor Francis Soundararaj, is another Godhead. He is no more. He's Godhead, and he bought 2 versions of rendering of the poem T.S. Eliot by T.S. Eliot himself, and the other rendition by Neville Cahill. He made us, my professor made us, all of us, to listen to both the renderings of Eliot himself and Neville Cahill's as well. My God, No, he just played both on 2 days, two occasions, with a gap of 1 week, with a gap of 1 week. My God. And that was wonderful to listen to again and again. And that way, Eliot, Eliot has contributed a lot to us. Eliot, again, was a person disturbed by the 20th century disturbances of personal as well as societal problems. And he wrote his poem, The Westland. So it's a wonderful poem of 5 sections. And by 5 sections, leave alone the World War time or Eliot's personal problems. But look at the society in which he was living, and look at the sections he just brought us in his poem. The burial of the dead, first section. The game of chess, second. The fire sermon, third. Death by water, fourth. And what the thunder said, fifth. In all the 5 sections, he looks into the nuances of human life at one level, and at another level, he just looks into the psyche of human mind. And when he goes into the psyche of the human mind, he was able to look at the problems. I'm not referring to, or not am I going to explain every section, because all of us have the copies with us. We can easily go through, read, and again and again we can criticize, we can find fault with Eliot. Why did he write? Because we would say, first time after being taught by my teacher, when I started my career, I looked at the piece and I was angry with T.S. Eliot. That anger made me love him more. For nearly 2 decades, every year I used to read the poem at least once. Every section, every word, you sit and carefully read. You will see Eliot's greatness. And that way Eliot is with Shakespeare. That is why, I thought that the two classics could be visited, could be revisited. And look at this, and you will see, and these 5 sections culminate in identifying our problems at one level, and at another level, identifying the truth. And what the truth is, the ideal or ideology. And I find that ideology and that truth is peace. P-E-A-C-E, peace. With all the things that we have, most of us are not happy. And we ought to be happy. Because I read Eliot's Westland every year 20 times, it was possible that I could become happiest. Every year brings new cheer, and every time we meet people, I think I met Professor Pinaki 2 years before, so simple, so humble, so wonderful, because some of our wonderful characteristics are, which are basic in us, but we don't exploit that. Two virtues: simplicity and humility. Simplicity and humility. These two constitute or make the personality of whoever we are. That is what we are. That is why Eliot was able to just present to us the problems, and was able to find the solutions as well. Whereas Shakespeare presented only the problems. So, for example, Othello's problem, Desdemona's problem, Iago's problem. There was no solution. He was not able to give us solutions, because some great writers always present the problems and they want us to solve or find the solutions for the problems. But this 20th century poet, T.S. Eliot, uh, found solution, found salvation in Oriental philosophy. That is where comes our Upanishads, our rituals, our writings by sadhus and rishis and munis. And all these things have taught people. Of course, in India, within India, most of us are not going to our Vedas. Most of us are not going to. We are so westernized. We have gone to the West totally, like me, that I restrict to Shakespeare and T.S. Eliot alone. I should have instead gone into one of the Vedas or other scriptures or Upanishads and contributed something to lecture series like this, But Eliot was able to, he just problematizing everything. It's just problematizing. But in the last section, what the Thunder said, in the last lines, he utters the words, Datta Hedvam Damyata. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. In Neville Cargill's rendering, as well as T.S. Eliot's rendition, the last Shanti will not be heard. Because but the problems are there, and the problems have been finding solutions, and he has found solutions in Datta, the head of Damyata, Datta, give. Well, after all, what is the use of possession? What is the use of possession? You got to share that. Giving is sharing. But people amass wealth. Some political leaders have been found out by CBI or any other people that they have some, lakhs of crores. 1 lakh is more than enough. 1 crore is excellent. And lakhs of crores, that's a place where giving has stopped. And that is what Eliot brings, give, datta, Hedvam, sympathy. Sympathize with the people. If you are in the habit of sympathizing with our neighbor, there won't be problem at all. For anybody in America or anybody in India, we don't sympathize with the other. Okay, and that is why there are sufferings. Sympathy, sympathize, give, sympathize. And for both, what is essential is control. Self-control is the obvious methodology that would take us wonderfully well in our life. Self-control. We must be able to just identify things around us. And if we identify the things, we will be able to understand that, accept that, and finally we get our release. We are very happy and we go for some retreat somewhere or other that we are on the process of becoming a noble spirits. This is what the two writings, namely Shakespeare's Othello and Eliot's Wasteland, do for our human existence. And as I said earlier, these two writers have their impact on the present lives as well. In our life also. We can't say that, as I said earlier, we can't say that there is no Othello, there is no Desdemona, there is no Iago around us. Around us, everybody is there. We ought to safeguard ourselves. And for that, you need these three, namely, Datta, Dayadvam, Damyata, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. You will have to acquire that. And these are the disturbances, as I said. And in the present society also, there are disturbances. We look at people, and I would wind up with an event, an incident, or it's an accident which took place a couple of days before near a college near my residence in Coimbatore. See, well, as I said earlier, what do I say? That kerchief is the problem for the people, and the AI or ChatGPT or social media is the problem for the present day generation. One boy who was in love with a girl, one-sided love. Poor guy. That guy, stabbed that girl. Couple of days back, Yeah, technology has not helped him. Knowledge has not helped him. Parents have not helped him. But somehow or other, he has developed some idea that he has brought out a debacle in the life of that girl. Poor girl, we don't know. I don't know whether the girl is dark or bright like Desdemona, nor the boy anything, But the boy has done it, and now that boy is in the prison, and the girl is in the hospital. That is where no, it happens everywhere. If you take a channel paper every day, you see at least four murders. Four murders. I don't know about the regional papers in your state. Okay? And that is where literature brings in us a kind of a balance. That is what a great personality like our former President APJ Abdul Kalam, okay, he was balancing himself with technology as well as literature. For example, his own book, Wings of Fire. Wings of Fire. So, literature human beings, saves human beings. And with that note, I think I will wind up. Let's be humble. Let's be simple so that we get the blessings of everything, everybody. God bless you. Thank you very much, Professor Nandini, Professor Paramita, Professor Pinaki, and
Thank
all
you,
my
sir.
friends who have been listening to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for such an
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
analytical and compelling lecture. Now, I would like to introduce our next speaker. It is my privilege to introduce him, Dr. Pinaki Roy. Dr. Pinaki Roy, sir, is a resident of Badurghat in Dakshin Dinajpur and currently serves as a faculty member in the Department of English at Raiganj University, located in Uttar Dinajpur district, West Bengal. With more
That's
than
all. That's all, ma'am.
okay,
Nothing
okay,
else needed.
okay.
Oh, God.
And I would like to invite Dr. Pinaki Roy, sir, to kindly deliver his lecture.
Okay.
Sure.
Thanks to the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Nandini Sahu, for giving me this chance to speak here, and to Paramita ma'am for the wonderful coordination, and of course Bala sir for the wonderful lecture, invigorating lecture that I was actually listening to intently. So basically, as the what is the kind of the subject of your lecture series, that is the lecture series that is being patronized by Nandini ma'am, is comparative world literatures. And so what I'm going to speak about today is the German writings of the First World War, because there would be some kind of what is kind of a comparative study over here, because all the time when we'd be actually speaking about modernism, about postmodernism, what definitely comes in, because in modernism and in postmodernism, two things have actually what is the kind of mostly what is the that is influenced these two literary trends, modernism and postmodernism, and that is the First World War, which actually shaped the that is the modernist writers, and the Second World War, which actually shaped the postmodernist writers. So basically, what I'm going to speak on today is the German war writings, particularly of the First World War. I have got many things to say, because it would actually spill into another 2 or 3 hours that I'm not going to what is the kind of I'm not going to what is give you the pains of listening to me for long. So basically, what I would be actually presenting some parts from my paper. Now, what basically happened during the First World War is a very interesting thing, and whenever we would be actually speaking about modernism, would be speaking about word writings. So basically, it would always be the English word poets. Now, why only English word poets? There is a great kind of what is the kind of political and kind of socio-cultural politics at work here. Now, what happened during the First World War was that the First World War was basically a war between three cousins. How? That is William II, who was the Kaiser of Germany, and King George V of England, and Russian Tsar Nicholas II. They were basically cousins, and the Kaiser of Germany and the King of England, they were basically the the grandsons of Queen Victoria. Very interesting. And these people, they were very much locked in a deep relationship. They would be actually addressing each other in letters like Willie and Nikki and Georgie. Now, basically, when the First World War broke in, this Willie and Georgie and Nikki, they found themselves at loggerheads against each other. I'm going to come into the details of that. But of course, Georgie had the upper hand, and when the First World War actually started, and when the modernism was actually setting in, the English people were very much what is a kind of anxious to show that, well, our nationalism comes first, our national concerns come first, and it is not the war between the cousins, but basically it is because of different national interests and national ideas, and what's the kind of there are the business concerns and everything, and that is why we are fighting the war. And what happened was that during the initial months of the First World War, we would be getting at least 200 to 250 English word writers. Very interesting. If you actually remember what Philip Larkin wrote in 1914, that there were thousands of people who had actually lined up at the recruitment centers to enlist themselves, and the same thing had also happened in Germany. And but the Germans, they were actually what's the kind of misled by a perception. What was the perception? They thought that, well, we are having a kind of a deep relationship with the English people, and it is still continuing, because you would be finding that the English people always prefer the Germans and the Germans prefer the English. They would be studying in the English universities, and the English people would basically prefer Heidelberg or Berlin or what's the kind of Dusseldorf. And there is always a kind of a mutual exchange between these two countries, and they were what is the kind of brother in arms, because the relationship between England and Germany, it was actually around 1,000 years old when the First World War started. And what we are basically reading as English is basically German. The writings, the writing style, the words, the part of the lexicon, that has actually emanated from German, the language. So the Germans were thinking that, well, the English people were sharing a kind of a deep bond with us. Our king and the English king, they are basically cousins, and so it is not going to last long. And that was the kind of a misconception. Now I'm going to come into the details of that. Now, whenever we would be speaking about the literature of the First World War, and which actually influenced literary modernism, we usually refer to the English writings of the war, and secondary the verses by the soldier poets like Edward Thomas or Siegfried Sassoon, Ivor Gurney, Wilfred Owen, or Edmund Blunden. Now, interestingly, as a part of this deliberate epistemic straitjacketing, I am using this term, epistemic straitjacketing, writers of belligerents from even other countries of the Triple Entente, those countries which were actually collaborating with England in attacking Germany, that is France and Russia or USA, tend to be excluded. Now, would be as we would be speaking about war poetry, as we would be speaking about literary modernism, would always be getting references to the British writers, not even the French writers, not even a very little amount of the American writers, not even the Italian writers, nothing. Only the British writers everywhere. From the opposing, and it is quite natural that writers, especially the poets from the opposing forces, that is the Central Powers, which was actually formed of Germany and Austria-Hungary, and that is these were some of the, and Turkey, of course, there was there. So would be kept away from the purview of the general readers across Europe and the former colonies, including India. Now, it is not that Germany, Austria-Hungary, or Turkey lacked in word items and they would actually be influencing literary modernism. No, it was not that. Or in general, word writers during the First World War, rather many of them were as talented and as truthful as, if not more than, the English writers of the First World War. However, while thousands of critical and biographical works on, for example, Thomas or Sassoon or Brooke or Rosenberg or Owen have been and are still being written, I am a part of that because I actually produced a biography of Wilfred Owen some years ago. Powerful voices like those of August Ram or Wilhelm Klemm or Gerrit Engel or Franz Danwitz and Wilhelm Runge are relegated to the margins even in the 21st century. Now, this in spite of the fact that through their themes, coverage, messages, and anti-militaristic credo, these German war writers and many more are always have always out-talented, I'm using the term, out-talented their English counterparts. Now, this, however, deserves mention that history has traditionally chosen to listen to the story of the victors and not of the vanquished. So, what basically happened is that, and that is why Erich Maria Remarque's All Quiet on the Western Front, and now comes the very interesting information. Now, Erich Maria Remarque had a very limited active combat experience. He spent just 1 month and 5 days on the war front. And most of the time he was wounded and he would be actually relegated to the dressing station, to the wounded station. And now he has actually written one of world's, most important modernist and anti-war writings, that is All Quiet on the Western Front. And this guy was basically on the war front for just 1 month and 5 days, and most of the time he was at the hospital. And now, because of the Allied politics, he has become one of world's greater, modernist writers from Germany. Whereas Ernest Jünger's Storm of Steel is outrightly neglected. Now, this Ernest Jünger, he had actually spent 4 years on the front. He was wounded multiple times, and each and every time he would be actually returning to the front. And now we don't know, basically many of us don't know about his name. That is, you don't know the name of Ernest Jünger, but we all know the name of Erich Maria Remarque. Now, this guy who had actually spent just 1 month on the front and most of the time in the hospital. Okay. Now, that is how politics works. So, it would be pertinent to note here that Germany's defeat in the First World War unleashed so many rabidly anti-German propaganda-based writings that Simon Jenkins, in a 30th January 2014 article published in The Guardian, apologized to Germany for the sickening avalanche of First World War worship. Now, that was the term he had used. One, however, needs to approach reading the Great War German poetry with Robert Higman's observation in mind. In his introduction to researching the First World War, Robert Higham writes that a significant number of Anglo-American accounts of the first global confrontation are misleading in that they give the expression that the memorists, the participants, the heroes spent all their times in the front lines in dreadful conditions, a myth perpetuated by the illustrations chosen or mislabeled. Whereas in reality, combatants would have to spend on an average of 90 days on the front line. Most of the time, these people would be actually kept in the reserves. And now what we basically have when we would actually be reading the modernist writings, we would have this idea that these people have been relegated to the front for 4 years. They are actually fighting all the time. They have got no place to sleep, and they would have nothing to eat. But basically, that was never so. Because on an average, the area of the times of service was just 90 days, 3 months, and most of these 3 months would also consist of breaks. So basically the picture that we have of the First World War writers, of the First World War poets, that they're always fighting and they are being killed at any time, it was not so actually. That is the part of the reality. In stark contrast, the German war poets were quite realistic in such portrayals. Now, basically, that is the difference, because the English should always be glorifying their participation in the war, and the German writers, they were very much realistic. They would not usually glorify, just some of them would. The average German soldier poets chose to only truthfully portray the actual conditions of combat using a very limited number of words. So there would be a kind of you would be actually pulling yourself in to describe what you are very much conscious about what you are basically writing about. Importantly, as both Baird and Scherer write, the ordinary Germans as willfully and joyously participated in the First Great War as did the English and the French soldiers. They were equally joyous. An early photograph from the time of the initial Great War mobilizations preserved in the Imperial War Museum. I am a member of Imperial War Museum. displays jubilant Germans heading towards the front by train, whose compartments have been marked with optimistic messages about winning the confrontation quickly. So, the usual reader's attempts to find only disgust for and disillusionment with the 1914 to 1918 war in German poetry bring out either nothing or false inferences. It also deserves mentioning here that Germany produced as many talented and efficient war poets as did England or, for example, France or USA. German war poets like Adolf Brittens or August Ram or Albert Michel, Wilhelm Klemm, Ernst Stedler, Gottfried Bein, or Friedrich Wolf, Alfred Lichtenstein, Gerrit Engels, or Kurt Adler. So there were a number of war poets who could easily outmatch the excellence of the poems by the British, French, or American soldier poets of the First World War. Now, these writers also gave rise to literary modernism in Germany as well, and they also contributed in influencing what was happening in England after 1914. So basically, they had got lots and lots of contributions on the shaping of English modernism, because their writings would sometimes be what's a kind of translated and read, and these after the war they were actually basically relegated to the sidelines. The same thing happened during the Second World War as well. Analysis of the German poetry of the First World War are not very much difficult for a non-German using reader like me. In fact, Ann Leader finds a remarkable commonness in both the English and German war publications in their poignant portrayal of perforated battlescapes. Perforated battlescapes, a very important term. Okay. Interestingly, Hamburger has refused to give importance to the limited number of German Great War poems available in English translation because, as he writes, censorship and repression had permitted no honest war poetry to be published on the German side throughout the world wars because of censoring, because of the Allied politics. These writings have been chosen by the English translators in such a way that they tend to represent German war poets as being naturalistic and instinctively evil, greedy, and demonic. Now, this is outrightly unethical. We should actually have the idea of what was basically really happening in Germany during the First World War. The first German war writing to have attracted attention immediately after the First World War broke out was the Song of Hatred Against England. I am not going to the German title. That was Hessen gegen England, written in 1914 by Ernst Leser, a German Jewish politician. Now, interestingly, there comes the what's kind of irony that it was basically written by a German Jew. This Song of Hatred Against England, it was written by a German Jew who, during the Second World War, would be killed in the gas chamber. Very interesting. Acha, a German Jewish politician who also coined the popular wartime phrase "God strafe England" or "May God punish England." In his much antholorized poem or song, Leisure writes rather vituperatively. I'm giving the English translation. We love as one, we hate as one, we have one foe and one alone, and that is England. Zita Fletcher writes in her 15th August 2022 article on HistoryNet that Leisure's song was received with sarcasm and hilarity by the English fighters, and the propaganda plan backfired against the writer because basically he was not to be what is kind of respected in Germany very soon, because the Nazis were taking the power in 1933, and they would start what is kind of annihilating the Jews. Now, Leisure's writing, nevertheless, was followed by several others by such authors as Karl Hermann Busse, who published the Grim German War Song in 1915, Richard Demel, who had already released Beautiful Wide World in 1913, Heinz Ewers, or Walter Flakes, the composer of Wild Geese Noise Through the Night, and Walter Hasenclever, publisher of Towns, Nights, and People. I'm giving the English titles of these writings. 1910, all of whom had volunteered for the German military during the Great World War. Interestingly, contrary to English war poetry, German war poetry took a considerable period to mature as a subgenre. Another very important term, because English war writings and they were actually contributing to literary modernism, they had actually kind of commanded an immediate attention as soon as they came to be written. But German war poetry took a long time to mature, because the average German was not basically interested in what was happening on the front. They were basically interested in having 2 square meals a day, They would be interested in driving out the Kaiser and everything, but they were not basically not what's the kind of not nowhere they were interested in what was happening on the front. On the other side, the English people, they were always on the radio to listen to what was happening on the front. Now, there was a complete apathy in Germany after the initial grew up, or rather kind of or this kind of enthusiasm for participation in the First World War. The Germans were very much realistic. Now they thought that, well, as realists, we should be concerned more about having 2 square meals a day. Let the soldiers fight over there. They were what's kind of sending money. They were sending clothes and everything. They were sending their sympathies, everything, but they were not very much interested of what was happening on the front. But this was not occurring during the Second World War, because during the Second World War, what happened was that the most what's the kind of the all the news of the war was first transferred to the Germans. Now they were very much interested during the Second World War, but not during the First World War. They were not interested at all what was happening. Okay, the commander of the Garde Grenadier Regiment Number 5, Guido von Gilhausen, had a vision of the fall of the German Empire in August 1914, and yet in his last poem, written before his death at the Battle of Somme in April 1914, in 1918, he writes, "I know why I am suffering, and have shed my blood. I fought in the German army for German sacredness, as a shield bearer for German honor, for the glory of the German future." That was these are parts of these are lines from his poem. That and the poem was known as "The Vision of the Fall of the German Empire." For Walter Flex, the writer of The Wanderer Between the Two Worlds, a chance to serve the fatherland during the Great War presented the young soldier with a rare opportunity or to receive the elements in a feast of national communion. And even after burying his friend Ernest Urzek, killed in action in France in May 1917, he could write, "The sword, so often grazed at with joy, glows silently in its own brightness. It covers the breast of the sun youth, the golden lamps of flowers." So deliberate attempts to read Great War German poetry only for signs of weakness and disillusionment would be a total fallacy. Even the poets who later began to castigate Germany's Great War participation were quite enthusiastic in the beginning of Germany's war efforts. Hugh Strachan writes how the beginning of the 1914 to 18 engagement was viewed as a new departure for Germany, and how intellectuals like Johann Penge or Thomas Mann celebrated the mobilization. Even Thomas Mann, he was actually very much in the beginning was quite enthusiastic about Germany's participation in the First World War, and he would actually become rabidly what's the kind of anti-war in his later years. Okay, okay. Celebrated the mobilization. Otto Weigmann, in his translated poem, The German Youth, published in the Kostleiner Zeitung of 5th August 1914, wrote, I'm quoting, "Then let the holy war begin. The united Germany will win, because all are holding together, city dweller and farmer, the young and the old." Geoffrey Very, while condemning the enthusiasm of the Germans regarding the onset of the war as a hubris, nevertheless terms the spirit as the pleasure of witnessing history. It is probably because of this inclination for witnessing history as well as demonstrating their love for their fatherland that German military volunteers and conscripts began to write mellifluously about the potencies of the war. As Patrick Bridgewater estimates, in initial days of the Great War, approximately 50,000 war poems were being written in Germany daily. Just think of the kind of war writings that was coming from Germany in the initial days. 50,000 war poems were being written on daily in Germany, from all parts of Germany. Okay. It is, however, true that several German war poets also wrote steadily against the perceived bellicose mentality of the nation. Though the war Krieg had traditionally been attached to words like patriotismus or Tapferkeit or Männlichkeit or Abenteuer or Ritterlichkeit, it is also associated with terms like Tod or Blut, that is dead body or blood. And during the First World War, Gerhard Hauptmann and the soldier poet Emil Erich Kästner were true prominent pacifists. Several communist poets have been considered consistently vociferous against Germany's war efforts. They were generally not soldier poets, albeit some of them were drafted, but they had apocalyptic visions regarding a total war. These people were very much afraid that, well, we are actually going into the total war, and this is not going to prove very good for Germany. Johannes Robert Bischer, who published his warning verses in the Action and the new Kunst, was a conscientious objector like his comrade Heinrich Blücher. As Arndt recalls, the two poetry collections of Walter Boyer were later banned by the Nazis for their innate anti-war messages. They were relegated to the status of the fourth world writers at that time, and it is presently the situation for the German writers of the first global belligerents. Now they are the fourth world writers. Just think of what has actually happened to them. There are several writings by talented German soldier poets which could not be included in the anthologies published from Germany in the recent years. These include poems by Hermann Lorenz, the poet of Heath, the expressionist Alfred Lichtenstein, who composed such memorable poems as The Athlete, Smoke on the Field, Dreaming, The Sad Man Before Being Killed at the Somme, the nihilist Hans Lebrold, who committed suicide on 8 September 1914, the night he was expected to rejoin his regiment in Belgium, and the expressionist poem Reinhard Scharge, also killed at the Somme. Other than those mentioned above, some non-combatant and non-German writers writing in German contributed to the genre of German First World War poetry, and this had actually contributed a lot in shaping up of modernism in England and the English-speaking world. And they include Hermann Hesse, who wrote great wartime poems from Switzerland. Hermann Hesse, it's all known because he has written something extra. Rainer Maria Rilke, Stefan Zweig, Oskar Kokoschka, George Trakl, and Franz Werfel. Rilke's The Fourth Duino Elegy and Sonnets to Orpheus, the diverse and pessimistic poems collected in Werfel's The Day of Judgment and Zweig's Jeremiah, are critically acclaimed for their steadfast critiquing of soldiering and imperialism. Now, Christian Feuerle has patronized the First World War poems for their contribution to literary modernism. In fact, literary expressionism and the German language journal, The Sturm, The Action, and Simplicismus have become intimately associated with the First World War time German combat verses, which together contributed to modernism and even postmodernism in literature. In addition, many of the German poems published during the First World War, like the British and American counterparts, reflect the horrors of the events and question its glory. That was these were written in the later half of the war. Among the writers of this grim school of poetry were Strahm, Michel, Ernst Stedler, Gottfried Benn, Schank, Toller, and Rich. On the other hand, the sonnets and lyrics written by Klemm, Lichtenstein, or Adler fondly remember and celebrate the courage and comradeship demonstrated by the imperial forces at the fields of, for example, the Somme and Wieper. So this was also happening in England because there were poets like Wilfred Owen and Siegfried Sassoon who were writing against the war, and there were poets like Edmund Burke, that is Brooke, Rupert Brooke, and the writer was who had actually glorified war. Just let me recall. His name was Edmund Blunden. In his early years, he was actually writing in favor of the First World War. Now this was happening in Germany also. And one of the major German soldier poets, August Strahm, was awarded the Iron Cross twice for his courageousness at Alsace and Somme, and was killed at Poland. He was a visionary who foresaw a terrible and mangled end for Deutschland, and published several futurist war poems warning of such a fate in Der Sturm. His collected poems, titled Rose Blood, were published from Berlin in 1919. Michel, who hailed from Munich, published The Despairing, Struck in Night in the Action before being killed on the Western Front in June 1915. The Oxonian Stedler printed his collection of expressionist anti-war poems, The Departure, in 1914, the year he joined the Imperial German Army as an artillery lieutenant, only to be killed in action at Wieper in October. So Benn was a military physician who served in occupied Brussels and published his collection of expressionist poems titled Flesh in 1917. His anti-militaristic verses, banned later by the Nazis, focused primarily on the degeneracy and medical aspects of decay. Anton Schank, who had been compared with Wilfred Owen, recollected his war experiences in stanzas of Greed and Animal Wrestled Powerfully with Animal, published in 1920. Now, William Runge, a poet of the Sturm Circle, was killed in action at Aarau in March 1918, but not before he had finalized the publication of The Thoughtful Daydreams from Berlin, which forced even the more patriotic and world-loving Germans to reconsider the necessity and results of militarism. Critics, however, generally tend to overlook the other features of these war verses, such as their aesthetic and stylistic features, unlike, for example, what Patrick Bridgewater does for claims at the front. And this is approved of by Kremer in her The Representation of War in German Literature, because they can, as she develops, undermine a text's martial stance and its pacifist agenda. Though a committed soldier and later a leftist writer, Ernst Toller, the German equivalent of Sassoon in common pacifist stance, initially and voluntarily enlisted as an artillery observer in the 1st Bavarian Foot Artillery Regiment, and he served in France and Belgium before he was shell-shocked in May 1916. In 1918, he co-organized a munitions workers' strike in Munich and was involved in anti-war efforts until being imprisoned briefly for treason. Throughout his life, he continued to publish a number of anti-war poems and plays, including the early Moses Man in 1921 and the Machine Wreckers in 1922, and enjoyed prominence until 1933, when his works were banned by the Nazis. In 1938, as a migrant to the USA, Ernst Toller began to lobby for pro-republican intervention in the Spanish Civil War, and later suddenly committed suicide on 29th May 1939. So, in conclusion, it may be said that the German poets of the First World War have been willfully relegated to the margins, and we, the Indians, scarcely read them, for example, oblivious to the fact that these writings had played a major role in ushering in literary modernism and expressionism. It should be remembered that if the English First World War poems are here to stay, so are the German poems of the Great War, in spite of all the propaganda against them. That's all, ma'am. Thank you. Hello? Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
There is a second part to that, but I don't think I would be having time for that because that is a long portion. So I'm stopping here.
Don't worry, Chair.
Sir, we will have to arrange another webinar, I think, if
Okay.
Madam permits us.
Yes. Ma'am,
Hello.
please give me some time to read the second part any day.
Sure. So, Paramita, how much time we have?
Ma'am, 10 minutes.
Ma'am, it
more.
is not going to happen now because it's a long portion of the
Okay,
Second
then
World War.
we can have another lecture with you
Yes,
probably.
any time.
If you need another 45 minutes or something, we can have another lecture with you. Or
Ma'am,
now, if you want to finish it.
Ma'am, let me complete it for today. I can correspond it with you later and thereafter find a suitable time that actually fits you also.
Okay, but now we can give you 15 more minutes if you
Ma'am,
like.
it is not going to happen because it's a long portion and it is going to be boring now. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Okay, no problem. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Now I would like to request Professor Nandini Sahu, ma'am, for her very valuable remarks. Ma'am, please.
Yeah, thank you, Paramita. Such interesting and such engaging two lectures. I don't know if I will be able to do justice if I try to give some comments on the lectures of both of them. But anyway, I have jotted down a few points when they were speaking. I thought we can use these points as a part of our syllabus when we design our comparative world literatures syllabus. And from Bala sir, I have taken important points vis-a-vis English literature as comparative world literature pedagogy, and it is studied as one literary tradition among many universal and canonical traditions. He
Wonderful.
emphasized on the
Wonderful.
canonical studies, and yes, and he compared many British writers like William Shakespeare and many of them with a lot of Indian writers, with South Asian writers. And then he approached Shakespeare as a global and transnational figure whose texts are new meanings. They acquire new meanings through translation, adaptation, and cultural reinterpretation. We have so many Shakespearean reinterpretations in India, like Varnam Vana is, folk tradition in Karnataka, taking Shakespearean tragedies, isn't it? And he talked a little bit, mentioned about them. Then Balasar also emphasized on the comparative readings that take place alongside Greek, Sanskrit, African, and Asian literatures to examine the shared themes and divergent aesthetic systems in many literary traditions. And then he also discussed about English literary genres, which are analyzed comparatively to reveal culturally specific narrative forms, ethical framework. And then Balasar also talked about post-colonial rewritings that interrogate and re-signify the English canons, transforming it into a site of resistance and dialogue. And then he mentioned comparative world literature as a part of the polycentric, multilingual, and intercultural literary network. And then his mention of many British writers, how they can be contextualized, they can be put as a part of Indian literary pedagogy in comparative literature departments, was something very meaningful. And I think we have taken interesting and important points from you, Bala sir. When we get into
Thank
our
you very
work, we
much.
design our syllabus, we will take your help and your points in the due
Sure.
course of time. And now, coming to Dr. Pinaki, his paper was his research was very interesting. Is he listening, Dr. Pinaki? Are you listening to us?
Yeah.
Ma'am, actually,
Yes.
I was called by one of the officials from Kolkata. I'm just sending him a message, and thereafter I'm joining in, ma'am. Just, ma'am,
Okay, no
please
problem.
continue, ma'am. I'm
No
listening to what
problem.
you are saying, of course.
Yeah, sure. So, Dr. Pinaki, he discussed about German literature, how it offers a critical archive for comparative studies of modernity, war, and ethical ruptures in the world. And then he gave examples from many German writers. He mentioned interesting and important writers like Hermann Hesse, and how the First World War and Second World War literatures have shaped world literature in a different way. Minus the war poetry, probably world literature would have been a different place today. And he took important points from many authors. He talked about translation, how it mediates the global a circulation of German world literatures within the world literary pedagogies. And then he mentioned comparative world literature as how it destabilizes the binaries of victim and the perpetrator in German war narratives. There are many silenced voices. Many people have not yet known them through research. He tried to point out those silenced voices in German literature
And
and
ma'am,
brought them to.
thank you so much for allowing me to speak on this topic, because
Yes.
I love this topic, because these people have been, what to say, kind of, they have been silenced and they have been relegated to the margins all the time, in spite of all their talents. And that is how the allied politics is always at work.
Yes, yes,
Politics.
yes.
Thank
So,
you so much,
so
ma'am.
you took the politics of the silenced voices, you
Yes,
gave
yes,
a
ma'am.
voice to the subaltern, to the marginalized, and you brought
Yes,
them
ma'am.
to the mainstream through your lecture and your research. But unfortunately, you could not complete your entire paper. We
Yes,
gave you
yes,
only
ma'am.
45 minutes.
Yes.
Probably Paramita can give you another 45 minutes in another lecture some other
Okay,
day.
ma'am.
She can
Mm,
coordinate with you. We would like
mm.
to know your entire research. We want to keep your entire research as a part of our archive. Thank you so
Thank
very
you, ma'am.
much for being a part of this lecture series. Both of you have substantially contributed. Thank you and namaskar.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
ma'am.
very
And
much.
thank you, ma'am, for inviting me, for giving me this opportunity to speak on an area which is basically very much close to my heart, because these people need to be represented.
True. Yes.
They are the subalterns in the field of world literature.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Uh,
Thank
Paramita, ma'am.
and as we come to the end of today's enriching webinar on comparative world literatures, I would like to take a moment to reflect on the meaningful academic exchanges we
Thank you.
witnessed today.
Thank
I
you.
extend my sincere gratitude to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Ma'am, Professor Nandini
And
Sahu.
me too. Yes.
Is,
I'm also extending my gratitude to her, and to Bala
Thank
sir
you.
and to
Thank you
you.
very
Yeah.
much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
and we are deeply grateful to our esteemed speakers, Dr. Pinaki Roy, sir, and Dr. Bala Subramanian, sir, for their insightful and thought-provoking lectures. My heartfelt thanks also go to the Hindi University team, whose coordinated efforts ensured the smooth organization of today's webinar. A special word of appreciation is due to our technical support team, Ms. Kajari Das Roy and Mr. Raj Jaiswal, for the efficient handling of the digital platform and for ensuring the
Right.
seamless flow of the session. And finally, I thank all the participants, faculty members, and students for their active presence. With this, we formally conclude today's session. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to your continued association with Hindi University West Bengal. Thank you and have a
Thank you.
pleasant day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaskar. Namaskar. Namaskar.